I'm going to tell you a story, a very old story, about a very unlikely encounter between two people, two very different people with literally nothing in common. They came from different lands, different cultures, different religions. One was a Jew, one was a Gentile. And besides all that, one was a man and one was a woman. It is practically unthinkable that they ever would have met except for the grace of God. And it was an encounter that would be life-saving for both of them. The man was Elijah, a prophet of Israel during the reign of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. Now, because of their evil ways, Elijah had prophesied a drought in the land, a terrible drought that would never end until he, Elijah, gave the word. So it was pretty understandable that Elijah would be in big trouble with the king, and he had to run for his life. God led him to a place where he would be safe and hidden. It was by a babbling brook, so he would have plenty of clear, fresh water. And then, wonder of wonders, what would happen? But ravens would bring him food every day. So he was able to be safe and fed and sheltered for a long time. Well, what would happen though eventually was that the brook would dry up. And so Elijah had to again turn to God to save him. God told him to go to a far off town called Zarephath. And he said, I have chosen a widow there who will provide for you. So Elijah went. He set off for Zarephath, and as he was approaching the town, he saw a woman gathering sticks, and something told him that this was the woman he was seeking. But as he got closer, he was absolutely astounded. He could see she looked so frail and weak. And then he noticed she had a boy with her, and he also looked malnourished and pale. And Elijah thought, oh no, can this be the woman I'm seeking? God, did I misunderstand you? Did I mishear you? Surely this poor woman doesn't have anything I could ask her for. But he took a deep breath, trusted in God, and approached her. And he said, woman, can you bring me a cup full of water? Well, what must she have thought? Why is this stranger, this foreigner, asking her, an obviously destitute woman, for water in this time of drought? But hospitality is very highly valued in her culture, so she agrees. But then she turns to go get the water, and Elijah says, oh, and bring me a bit of bread. Bread? Can he be serious? She said, sir, I swear by your God that I have no bread. In fact, all I have in the world is a little bit of flour in my jar and a little bit of oil in my jug. In fact, as you were coming upon us, I was gathering sticks so I could build a fire, and I was going to prepare one last meal for my son and myself. And then we will surely die. Well, Elijah would have seen the sorrow and despair on her face, and he must have thought, this is why God has sent me to her. God knew all along that he would be able to provide for me and her. So he said to her, don't be afraid. Go and prepare your meal, but first make me a little cake and bring it to me. Trust me, for the God of Israel promises you that your jar of flour will not be empty, your jug of oil will not be dry until the rains come again and the drought is over. Well, what was she to think? She didn't know this man. Why would his God perform a miracle for her? She was a nobody. But perhaps out of desperation and maybe a tiny little bit of hope, she did as she was asked. She baked the little cake and brought it to Elijah. When she went back into her house, there seemed to be a little more flour in the jar. There seemed to be a little more oil in the jug. Something had indeed changed. She had done what Elijah had promised. And as he had said, every day, day after day, week after week, month after month, there was enough flour in the jar and enough oil in the jug to last for a whole year until the drought ended and the rains came back. So what are we to make of this story? The widow would have been among the most poor and needy of her society. She could be like anyone in our world today that maybe we wouldn't even spare a second glance, or we might dismiss as unimportant to us in our lives. The homeless, the immigrant, indeed anybody that might be different from ourselves, a different race, a different culture, different sexual orientation, a different political affiliation, a different class, a different religion. But look at the barriers that Elijah and the woman crossed. Probably just like the barriers we think we perceive today. Sometimes it seems an encounter with God may come in the unlikeliest of places and by means of the unlikeliest of persons. As we watch the news and see the women of Ukraine fleeing with their children and leaving their husbands to defend their homeland, and we can just see the fear and the desperation in their faces. Or the families coming across from Central America, taking that long, arduous trip north with just the tiny speck of hope that there might be a better future for themselves. Or the people in Yemen that have survived years of just a punishing civil war. Of course, there's people in our own neighborhood, homeless, jobless, lonely, or maybe even people who have plenty of resources, but emotionally or mentally have reached the end of their hope, the end of their rope, and need someone. Is it possible that we might be the Elijah for someone that we might encounter? Could we be bringers of hope? And of course, this is a story of trust. Elijah believed that God would be with him. God had led him to a safe hiding place. Amazingly, God had led him to that poor widow. And what about the widow? She had to reach deep into her heart to find the strength to trust that Elijah and his God would save her. Who can know when an encounter with another person will be a moment of grace, an opportunity to greet someone with an open and generous heart? Let us be open to the possibility that God offers us in the presence of one another. The word of the Lord.